We'll get this meeting started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the February 27th meeting of the Oregon Water Resources Commission. We will just go ahead and jump right in. We got a lot to discuss first thing this morning. So we'll start with agenda item H, rulemaking update, water right transactions, contested case, and forfeiture rules. And I see everyone's ready to present. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Vice Chair Smitherman and commissioners. Today we're going to be talking about the large rulemaking that we're doing. And as we go through this presentation, there's one question I have for you about how you would like us to handle phase two. So when we get there, I'll pause us and we can talk about that because I am sensitive to how much paperwork you're about to get starting today. So we'll talk more about what you can expect to see here in the coming week or so. So before we get started, I'm Raquel Rancier. I'm the Deputy Director at the Oregon Water Resources Department, and I'm going to have us go in order, skipping me, obviously. And so if you can start on that end just for introductions purposes.
Yes, good morning, Vice Chair and Commissioners. My name is Lisa Jaramillo, and I'm manager of the Transfer and Conservation section.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning, Vice Chair and the Commissioners. For the record, my name is Katie Ratcliffe, and I'm the Water Rights Services Division Administrator.
Good morning. I'm Laura Hart, Water Policy Analyst and the Rules Coordinator on this rulemaking.
Okay, so what does this rulemaking implement? We always want to make sure we're tying back to the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. As you can see here, this rulemaking ties to at least two, I would say, of the Integrated Water Resources Strategy recommended actions. I'm not going to read them to you this morning. And we're going to go ahead and get into rule context. So what we'll do today is we'll give you a little context based on the December presentation that we provided to the commission. I heard there was a desire to, I think, have more understanding of kind of the plain language before we get into the nitty gritty. We're going to do both today. And we'll step through the rule context, a little bit of that higher level perspective, and then we will go through the approach that we've used for this rulemaking. We'll then recap what we're doing again, and then we'll talk about next steps. And as part of the next steps, we will talk a little bit about some of the information you will be receiving later today, as well as some of the comments that we've heard. We don't have all of the answers to all of the comments we've heard because we've been working on it this week, but we will try to give you just a little bit more on that just so you can see what you might be reading about here shortly. Okay, so in terms of the rule context for you all, as you all are very well aware, we recognize that water right transactions and contested cases have significant backlogs and that they're not being processed timely. So this rulemaking really seeks to start to address that by making sure that the rules are clear, efficient, and consistent, and that we maximize our limited staff resources. So this is really directing us towards trying to make more timely decisions. It's a step, right, in the process. The rules do that by implementing the two major pieces of legislation that we've talked about, which is related to the water right transactions efficiencies bill and then the contested cases bill. And then they also align the rules with other statutes and legislation. Some of these rules haven't been updated in a while, right? So we still have to, when we say, oh, we're implementing 2025 legislation, we're probably also implementing legislation from potentially a decade ago. So we are also implementing other process and policy improvements and then undertaking a number of housekeeping items. So what does that mean? And this is, my attempt here to provide that higher level context for all of you. What do we mean when we're talking about water right transactions? So I think it's helpful for us to have that understanding as we go into these 13 rule divisions. And then phase 2 is another 5. And so I like to think about this in the context of the life cycle of water right. And I think that's the most helpful way to think about that. So as you all, and this will probably be basic for all of you, but I think it's a good grounding of what are we trying to do here, right? So when you think about the life cycle of the water right, first step, as we all know, is at least today, the first step is to apply for a new water right. And that results in a water right permit. And that authorizes someone to develop the right. And then while it's in the permit stage, you can apply to change the permit. So this is permits, right? And that is a permit amendment is one way you can apply to change a water right permit. You can also split a permit into 2 separate permits, or that's what we call our split a permit. The title of the rules say assignments. I don't know what that means. I know what split a permit means. So split a permit is what we will talk about. And then you can also extend the development timeline, right? That's an extension. So this slide is focused on permits. Once the permit's been developed, then you need to submit a claim of beneficial use, and then the department would issue a water rights certificate. So that's, as we look at this, there's these 2 boxes down on the right that I also need to acknowledge, right? Which are also authorizations to use water. One is around in-stream water rights, and the other one, which is similar to a new water right permit process, it's just in a different rule division. And then we have applications for limited licenses, right? Those are temporary authorizations, not quite the same as a water right permit, but I'm grouping them together for today's purposes because they are essentially a new authorization. If you look at these blue boxes here, these blue boxes are essentially different rule divisions. So let's keep going because we're not done. We don't have just this many rule divisions today, do we? Okay, so we now have a water rights certificate. Now what? Well, as we go through this life cycle, you can also do water right transactions once you have a water right certificate. So for example, you can put the water in stream. You can apply to transfer or change it. You can do a conservation project. So a change to a water right, depending on the transaction type, maybe a change in the type of use, place of use, or point of diversion. And so Oregon law does require, as we know, that water be used according to the terms and conditions of the permit, and that they're used once every 5 years. And that's where you get to the end of the life cycle of the water right, right? Forfeiture, or cancellation. So this would essentially be where the life cycle ends, and our rules also touch on that. Okay, when we're talking about this rulemaking, so we're touching on all these different transaction types, right? And that's what these various rule divisions are. But what do these divisions do? Well, they tell us how to process these things, right? And so a lot of this rulemaking is really focused on process. And that's why it gets very detailed. We give you the high-level presentation that touches on some of the issues that are of high interest, I think, to folks that are involved in the water right transactions. But we're not getting into every single detail, such as we require them to provide their contact information. Those are in these rules. If they're not proposed, or if they're not already in the rules, we're proposing to add things like that. We would like your email address so we can contact you, right? So when we go through the typical processing steps, this is for a permanent transaction, but this is an example of some of the things that we're trying to do. So just as a reminder, not every transaction is the same. Otherwise, we would only have one rule division, which would be great, but that's not where we're at today, right? 13. And so for the permanent transactions, we are trying to start to move them to be more similar. And that includes having an initial review where we take an initial look at the application, and then we share that for public comment, an applicant comment, and then we move that into a proposed final order, and that outlines the department's proposed decision essentially on that application. And then in this rulemaking, we're trying to move most processes to a situation where once the proposed final order is issued, if no protest is received, the order then will become final without us having to issue another document. Because today that's what we do. We have to issue another document before it becomes final. That's double work. So temporary transactions don't typically have this initial review look, right? So that's a good way to kind of parse through some differences. And yes, the legislation did introduce this concept of initial review into the transfers process. We already had it on the water rights side. So again, we're trying to align processes because that can help us be more efficient, right? There's less, at least thinking for me when I'm like, oh, wait, we're talking about a transfer. So now we have to talk about the DPD, the draft preliminary determination versus an initial review, which seems interesting that we decided to have different names for the same thing. So we will be introducing that as trying to get these processes aligned. So that's part of what we're doing when we talk about this. As you all know, the bill, one of the major pieces of legislation was around contested cases, and it was specifically focused on contested cases for water right transactions in particular. And it did not touch on hydro. We will talk about hydro, though, because there are some authorities that this bill provided us that we already had authority to do, right? And so it was more directing us to do it for these particular types of transactions. And that's what phase 2 starts to get at, right? So when we talk about contested cases, you all are pretty familiar with this, right? There's the contested case process. That's a hearing before the administrative law judge. And it can include for, things like civil penalties. So we have our enforcement side. There are some changes in the rules that apply to all contested cases, and there's changes in the rules that just apply to these ones that were in the 2025 legislation. So I want to make sure that we're clear about that when we talk about those. It is why you have an applicability section that is almost a page long. So, okay, let's move to the process. And I'm going to hand this over to Laura Hart.
Good morning. I just have a handful of slides here to review our process so far and sort of indicate next steps. This slide, you saw this in December, but essentially, as a reminder, we had 10 RAC meetings, 9 hybrid, 1 virtual between September and November of last year. We noticed our proposed rulemaking on January 2nd. The close of the public comment period ran through February 6th, so a little more than 30 days. We held 2 hybrid hearings at the end of January, one in Salem and one in Bend. We're currently reviewing the comments. We're making pretty good progress. I think we're most of the way through 10 or so of the divisions, and we're wrapping up the other 3. We're doing it the same way we did it before, and I think Raquel will go over it in a little bit more detail in terms of what you're going to see, but it's going to be very similar to the way we laid out the feedback for the RAC. So it's comments, our response, and whether or not we made changes to the rules. So it'll be pretty easy to see how we incorporated that public input. And then we're coming to you all in March, I believe virtually, hoping for adoption and getting the rules filed before April 1st to make that April 1st effective date for House Bill 3342. Next slide. This is our RAC roster. Again, we wish to express our gratitude for all the hard work and expertise, and it was a pretty big lift, and we're just very grateful for the active participation of these folks. As you can see, they're representative of a wide array of water user interests, geography, very active, both well-attended RAC meetings, almost 100%, I'd say, and equal measure virtually and in person. Okay. Let's see. So as Raquel mentioned, following our RAC meetings that wrapped up at the end of November, we took a look at the final RAC input and whatever public input we received up until then, and decided to go ahead and bifurcate our rulemaking effort, hoping that, reducing the volume would and splitting it in two would provide the public with a more meaningful opportunity to participate. In addition to that, we made some decisions about the land use compatibility element, scaling that back a little bit. And I think either Raquel or Katie will probably touch on that some more. So these are the 13 divisions that we noticed that Raquel will step through momentarily. Okay, and then these are the remainder of the divisions. So the 5 divisions that we'll be noticing as part of phase 2. So we've got the 3 hydroelectric related transaction divisions, 52 through 54, and then 320 and 330 are kind of miscellaneous catch-all divisions that we're doing some realignment and updates for those 2 particular divisions. Okay.
So I want to pause on this slide here.
Yeah.
So phase 2. We're talking about the timing on phase 2. And the big question we have is around briefing the commission again. So you all had received a presentation in December on these 5 rule divisions. And these ones are the ones that are less complicated and not as long. So the question I have for you all is, do you all want a briefing in March on these again? When we look at our schedule, we can go out for public notice April 1. I think we will be prepared to do that. But if we want to brief the commission before we go out for public notice, we want to brief you all again, then that would put us in March, essentially.
March.
And so that could be one option. The other option is we don't brief you all again because you've been briefed once, and we go out for public notice, and then that would have the decision before you all potentially in June. The other option is we don't brief you in March, and we then would brief you in June. We would still probably go out for public comment. We'd probably do that in May though. And then we'd brief you in June, and then we would request adoption in September. The reason this is important to sort through from our standpoint is if we bring you a briefing in March, that adds more papers to review. So I'm a little concerned about doing that. At the same time, I think we could also get out there for public comment, right, within it. So it'll extend out the timeline potentially if we hold off. So that's why I wanted to ask you all that question of what do you all prefer? We are ready to go in any of those directions, and you don't have to answer necessarily now, although since we're on phase 2, we can do that if the chair is comfortable with that. But I certainly appreciate hearing from you all, because this is about making sure you all have the information to be successful in making decisions. And if it helps you for context, the reason why I want to be thoughtful is this was the phase 1 filing, right? So you're going to start getting some of this stuff, right? This is not the exact, this is phase 1 filing. It is not the documents you all are receiving, but it gives you some context, right? Of what the amount of paperwork you may be getting for March. So without phase 2 being in there.
And as a reminder, March 1st is Sunday. So when we say March, it's really close. Yes. Any commissioners have a comment or thoughts on that? Commissioner Lee?
Yes, I read your memo that you sent about sending us sections with support documents as you move along. And I'm wondering if that process would be able to avoid a March meeting, if that helps you.
Chair and Commissioner, I think that we could certainly send you documents as we prepare for we will have a batch of documents that are prepared for the public notice. So in that situation, we could certainly do it. I would send it to you between March 20th and April 1st. And so it wouldn't be then a topic, under that scenario, it wouldn't be a topic for the March meeting, but you would get all the materials before they went out to the public, if that makes sense. So we could certainly do that.
Any other thoughts?
Question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Mall.
Ricardo, you said that these are relatively not your words, but relatively straightforward changes. Can you elaborate on that a bit more? Because if they are, I guess, do you anticipate there being a great deal of public comment and consternation over these changes?
Co-chair or commissioner, vice chair, I'm still getting used to, I know there's a chair here and here. Okay, so yes, so commissioner, I think these ones in terms of the RAC process, there was less comment on these. And so I think the changes are a bit more straightforward, and there's themes among 3 of the divisions, right? And the other 2 divisions are, a big part of it is renumbering and deleting duplicates, right? So I don't want to say that there's not policy issues in there, but in terms of how much comment we received from the RAC, these divisions had significantly less.
I know I'm rolling off the board. I would be getting some of this information because I don't roll off until April 1st, is my understanding. But thinking about the 2 new candidates coming in, on one hand, well, sure, wait and give them more orientation. On the other hand, I like the momentum that we have. And if they're relatively straightforward, I think that the muscle memory of expecting the commission to digest more information in a timely manner is a good process. So I would be supportive of having everything distributed by April 1st and having you all vote in June, for what it's worth.
And commissioners, there's always, we can bring it to the commission in June and you all can say, we're not ready, let's throw us back in September. So there is also that possibility. We're very accommodating, is what I'm saying. So
Commissioner Newman.
I agree with Joe. I think that, the momentum is worth keeping up, and we'll have plenty of big stuff for the new commissioners. And I think, if they're at the June meeting, which we understand they probably will be, they may feel a little bit adrift on, some of what's going on, but I think that's inevitable because they haven't been here through the legislative process and through the 13 divisions of rule changes. So, it's not ideal for them, and it's not, but I think it's good to keep the process going. So and I'm sure I'll kick myself when I get them on my computer, but I would be willing to go with Jan's plan of receiving information after March 19th and then having you guys take it out to the public.
Yeah, sounds like we have a consensus on keeping the momentum going.
Okay.
Moving forward. Thank you.
all right, let's move to the next slide.
Okay, yep. So it's also important to highlight our tribal engagement efforts. Prior to beginning the RAC process, we did send out invitations to all of Oregon's 9 tribes, offering to engage either informally, whether it be through, serving on the RAC or through us providing briefings, as well as requests for them to serve on our RAC committee, as well as government to government consultation. So we were fortunate to have staff from 2 tribes serve on our RAC. We did have 1 tribe request a briefing, and then we had 1 tribe that requested consultation on 2 occasions. In addition to that, we provided staff-to-staff updates during the quarterly LCIS Natural Resources Work Group and the Cultural Resources Cluster meetings. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay.
Can I ask just really quickly?
Yeah.
Was the nature of the consultation requests broad, or were there particular changes that they were particularly interested in?
I felt like the requests were rather broad, so it was more along the order of just making sure that we were honoring their sovereign rights, and then also encouraging us to pursue opportunities to engage in co-management and other cooperation. I don't know, Ivan, if you wanted to add anything regarding the Klamath consultation, since you were there in person for both.
For the record, Ivan Gall, Director for the Water Resources Department. Commissioners, I think Laura's characterization is correct. They were generally broad in nature, always a focus on continued communication and consultation with the tribes at appropriate levels and maintaining their sovereignty there.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, and then let's see, in terms of the actual process of noticing our proposed rules, we sent out Gov delivery notices as well as through our regular listservs. So, tailored emails to the tribes, again, offering to engage either through consultation or if they would prefer to provide public comment, encouraging them to do so, notifying cities, counties. We have listservs for certified water rights examiners and well drillers, the legislators that were required to notify. They also received that specific notification. We also had to provide a notice of proposed changes to the land use program because some of the rules that we are proposing for revision do touch on land use compatibility. And because of that, we needed to provide that additional notice. We didn't determine that our proposed rulemaking would have impacts to the land use programs, especially since we took that step back. But we were required to provide that additional notice, and that went out to cities and counties as well as our sister agencies and local land use planning contacts. Let's see. So in terms of the public comments we received, as I mentioned before, we had 2 joint info sessions and hearings, and we received no public comments at the Salem hearing, and we received 4 at the Bend hearing. And then we also received written comments. We received 18 that were individual, and of the 18, I think it was 12 came from RAC members. And then we received 122 form-generated emails. Those were mostly on the land use issue. And of those 122, 23 of them were modified slightly, but didn't raise any new or significant issues. I think, let's see if I have anything else to say on that. I guess I should add that on the notice of proposed rulemaking, we did discover 2 copy and paste errors. So we did add an errata sheet and noticed on that as well. And I think that's all I've got on that slide. So turn it to Raquel, right?
Okay, so like we did in December, we have prettier slides this go around, but we did highlight the ones that we're going to mention in blue. And just note, we're not going to cover every single thing. You are welcome to ask questions about every single thing on the slide, but we are trying to be efficient with your all's time as well. At the end, we will go through what tools you're going to get here starting today. And so we'll talk a little bit about that and how we will organize that for you all. Okay, so the first rule division that we have is Division 2. And so this division is driven primarily from legislation in 2025. So we know, though not entirely. And so the 2025 legislation allowed OWRD to be able to send and receive documents in electronic format. That was one piece of it that you'll see throughout all of these rule divisions. It also established a standardized process for protests, requests for party status, as well as contested cases for these transactions that we talked about today. And it provides that proposed final orders will become final automatically 33 days after the close of the protest period. So you will see these themes across all of the various rule divisions, and those ones will probably be highlighted in black going forward instead of blue for you all. And The statute also requires the department to develop a hearing schedule for hearings to be completed within 180 days. That's going to drive some other changes here. And the 180-day timeline will in particular influence some of the proposals around default schedule, which we'll talk about, as well as for the discovery. So it's important to note that these legislative changes did not apply to contested cases related to enforcement, adjudication, hydroelectric. It was really more specifically focused on the water rate transactions pieces and forfeiture. So there are some changes, though, that, you know, as we said, we have authority to make. And so those are also included in here, even if they weren't included in the legislation. And so that includes, for example, the discovery limits. So you'll see those changes that apply only to the types of transactions for House Bill 3544. That's that applicability section that's so important. So you know which parts of the rules apply to what cases. And just as a reminder, again, Division 2 does not apply to adjudications. So this is not about contested cases with adjudications. So within this, you'll see that we did develop a default hearing schedule that meets that 180-day timeline. And these other two ones that are highlighted in black here were required, non-discretionary from the legislation.
Raquel, I think we do have a question. Is it okay if we interrupt as we go through? Commissioner Mall, did you have a question?
I promise I won't ask on each slide, but actually it's two questions. Do you want to get through sections before we ask questions, or would you like us to ask as we go, given how many slides we're going to be looking at?
I think we can certainly go through each slide.
As we
Fine.
So just real quickly, with the acceleration that this is proposing, I'm just curious, maybe it's just a temperature check on, can we really do this? Are there going to be additional resources to be able to turn around decisions in those kind of days? I guess maybe if you could just flag if there are areas where you feel like we need to be aware of pressure points it's going to put on staff and the organization, that would be helpful.
Vice Chair Smitherman, Commissioner, I think the key pieces to this is that it is setting the pieces we've put into the rules are to help with that issue. So I think that it is more about making sure that there is the opportunity for discovery, right? Full and fair hearings at the same time. That there are also timely decisions, right? And that there's efficiency built into that. And so I think there's that trying to achieve that balance where we have these. I think that's why discovery in particular is one of the critical pieces to that, as well as this default hearing schedule. If up front you get the hearing schedule and you know the expectation is to have this completed in 180 days, that's different than getting an open-ended schedule, right? And so some of it is that. And I was going to hit on this later, but I can say that the default schedule and the discovery are the two most commented on, how's that, portions of the Division 2 rules. And so again, it goes back to this question of, do we want to have timely decisions? Because the process right now is not working, right? And so that's that balance there. Have we reached that balance with what's put forward in the rules? Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Newman.
Thank you. Just another question on this slide. Do you have a sense of how the percentage of PFOs that are not protested, so that we know how many are going to be able to go automatic to final order in 33 days? I mean, I don't have a sense of how many are protested or not.
I don't know exact numbers, although I suspect Katie does. But I think on the general principle, it's a small fraction. So I think a majority of the orders will go straight to final order. Katie, anything to add?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Newman. So I would agree with Raquel. We do seem to see more protests when we recommend denial of a proposed final order, as might be anticipated. And sometimes we issue a recommended approval of a proposed final order, but folks don't like the conditions that we've put in there that would be necessary to find the request is in the public interest, or it wouldn't incur an injury or enlargement. I'd say one of our processes where we tend to see a higher proportion of decisions protested is the extensions process. But it is still overall, outside of the extensions process, a fairly small number that get protested. And that does mean, like Raquel said, that most will be going default to final order, unless in a rare circumstance we determine we've made an error. And so we withdraw the PFO and then we reissue it.
Okay, so continuing on with Division 2, the rules include a number of actions, as we had just talked about, to make this process more efficient, timely, cost-effective, right, while still fair. And so this includes allowing the department to consolidate or bifurcate hearings prior to referral. And so that way you go in knowing what the case is, as well as placing limits on discovery. And we talked about that in brief, but that includes not allowing requests for admission as a means of discovery, limiting interrogatories to 10, and then limiting requests for production to 30 hours before the department may require a public records request. And one thing I'll emphasize on this is that we may require a public records request, right? And so I think that is, in some of the comments we saw, it said it's required. And it's like, well, no, it's not necessarily required, but it does have that discretion there, particularly when we're getting a lot of big requests, right? So with this significant contested case backlog, as you all know that we have, the goal really is to provide that process that allows for due process, but is also efficient. So we're denying other folks due process, in our opinion, if we don't have a timely decision, right? And so that's that balancing act that we have. So as part of this, the other piece I would highlight is that we are providing our file in advance. And I think that's important for us. And it's so important that we realized in the version that went out to the public that the getting the file in advance was only tied to the water right transactions portions of the rules, but it wasn't tied to all of the contested cases. And yet discovery was tied to all of the contested cases. So you will see when you get the documents that it's an OWRD staff proposed change that we provide that file in advance, because in our opinion, that is critical for these other discovery limits, is that you don't have to ask, right? It is not included in those 30 hours getting our file. We provide that to you upfront. So that is a change that you will see when it comes through to you that I want to make sure we highlight, because in my opinion, you all know I care about this work. That is important and fair. And so, okay. So moving on to the Division 305.
And may I add something on?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Raquel. And if I might add on to the response to Commissioner Newman's question, I was looking at the slide for Division 2, and if we go back one, so consolidation or bifurcation of hearings prior to referral. So I did want to add that I mentioned extensions are protested at a high rate, but in-stream water right applications are protested at a very high rate. So that has been the majority of what we would call our backlog in the protest program. And some of those have been pending for decades. It takes a long time to resolve them. So these changes could really make a difference in those. We do have 113 cases for in-stream water rights alone that we currently have before the Office of Administrative Hearings. And those were referred before this process will officially take place, but because we referred that prior to the implementation date of House Bill 3554, but there was agreement between the parties that we would consolidate those cases, and OAH accepted that. So 113 running together. There might still be a bifurcation based on some differences between some cases that have a party who requested party status and some cases where there isn't someone who requested party status. Thank you. All right, and moving on to Division 305. So Division 305 is a new rule division that would establish standardized map criteria for maps submitted to the Department for water right transactions. The intent is to reduce confusion and increase efficiencies by standardizing map requirements in one place. We'll note that additional specific mapping criteria may apply as provided in application-specific rule divisions. So where we know that map requirements should apply to every single map, you'll find that in Division 305. If there's some processes where additional information is necessary to evaluate the application against statutes, rules, and policy, then we have those specific mapping criteria laid out in those divisions. And I'll say that this is in part a response to a lot of feedback that we've heard in the Water Rights Services Division from CWREs, so Certified Water Right Examiners. We do our, we call it our CWRE Roadshow in a loving way. We have the pleasure of going around the state every October and meeting with CWREs and training them and hearing their concerns. And one of the frustrations that they had was mapping criteria vary across our different rule divisions. And so, and sometimes the criteria don't fully make sense from their perspectives, but we have them in rule. And so we need to ask for certain information. So this was eliminating criteria that we didn't think really made sense or changing it to criteria that made sense. And the intent is for us to have what we need to evaluate the applications, but also critically to facilitate public review of the applications and know what people are requesting and where they're requesting it. And then the maps are also used to create the record of the water right, which is important for everybody involved. Okay, our Division 14 rules. So you see CWREs are on the slide. It's a good segue there. Our Division 14 rule amendments would create clear linkages between Division 14 and our Division 17 rules. And Division 17 contains requirements for pump testing of non-exempt wells. So if somebody needs a water right for a well, they're going to need to submit a pump test or request a pump test exemption. Under Division 217, the department cannot process a claim of beneficial use on a groundwater permit until the pump test requirement has been satisfied. But there's clearly right now not a link with Division 14, because under Division 14, there's no requirement to submit that information, the pump test information, with the claim of beneficial use. So we have a lot of claims of beneficial uses, again, getting at streamlining, reducing backlogs, reducing processing times. We have a lot of claims of beneficial use sitting in our program that we cannot process because we don't have the pump test or pump test exemption request. And staff are needing to continue to request polls from IT to see, how those two pieces of information stack up, claims and if a pump test has been submitted. So this would reduce inefficiencies and confusions for claimants, increase efficiencies for staff processing these files. So the rule amendment would require the pump test or pump test exemption request be submitted at the same time that the claim of beneficial use comes in for groundwater permits specifically.
At the same time or prior?
Or prior.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. We will take that information early if somebody has it. That's great. Division 300 houses our definitions for many of our water right transaction processes. The rule updates create alignment with statute and across rule divisions and take care of some other housekeeping changes. Division 310 contains the rules for processing new water right applications that are undergoing the standard review process. This slide shows that in addition to the two pieces of legislation that Raquel already discussed, there's a third one that impacts Division 310. Senate Bill 1154 streamlined the public interest review for groundwater applications, specifically within a groundwater quality area that would consolidate drinking water wells under a public water system. So think of taking exempt wells and then instead of using water under those exempt wells still, using water instead under a public water system. The intent is to help address water quality issues faced by exempt wells in those areas. The rule updates would also require notice to a landowner if someone other than the landowner applies for a water right on that person's property. This is a due process requirement. If a person is signing on behalf of an entity such as a corporation, the rules would require evidence that they have authority to sign on behalf of that entity. The draft rules would remove informational requirements that we believe we already have an efficient means of obtaining otherwise. The existing new water right application process allows for administrative holds, and if those are granted, they prevent the department from issuing a proposed final order during the period of hold. So this is an applicant requested hold on processing. The rule changes would define what a reasonable and necessary hold is. This is a really, from my perspective, a very important process improvement change because we don't currently define what is reasonable and necessary. We make those determinations as the requests come in. But we've seen cases where folks have requested admin holds that cumulatively have put processing on hold for a decade or more. I mean, that's not the most common case, but we can go years with applicants requesting repeatedly to hold processing. So I think it's really important to point out that this process applies to new water right applications, and those are the ones that receive a tentative priority date. So when we talk about senior rights, junior rights, what we're talking about is the priority date that's established or tentatively established during the time that somebody submits an application and we find it complete. But if it sits there for years and they eventually do get the water right, it means that they have a senior priority date to those who maybe came in line a little bit farther down the line, a little bit later in time, but had all the information ready to go at that point.
Commissioner Mull?
Yeah.
So can you clarify what clarify means then? Because on one hand, I hear that maybe that's going to be foreshortened or limited, but is that assumption correct?
That is correct. And so I'll pull up the specific categories. So instead of it being completely open-ended for what somebody can request, and we just have the category or the criteria of reasonable and necessary, it defines what that is. And so the rule language, as we propose to amend it, would say that the cumulative length of extensions requested through admin holds shall not exceed 180 days. So right now, the process is, according to statute and our rules, they can request one admin hold up to 180 days, and they get that automatically. But this is putting parameters on all those subsequent holds that they request.
Can you say what rule division so that
Oh,
I
yeah.
can follow along?
Absolutely. So that's page 33 of the rules, if anybody's looking at the paper.
That number just.
Oh, okay. Yeah, section 0270, it's called timelines. And so the proposal is for the cumulative length of extensions requested through admin holds shall not exceed 180 days except upon a finding by the director that a longer extension is reasonable and necessary for the applicant too. And this is where you're going to see more of the red line text. And the team really thought about different scenarios because we've been doing this for years, different scenarios where folks have requested a hold and we found it to be reasonable and necessary. And we thought, what is a reasonable timeline for each of those categories? So if it would help, I can talk in brief about what some of those categories are.
Commissioners, so it's going to be on page 142 of the notice. And that is, again, that's 693-10-0270.
The question, when you're looking for the proof of signatory authority, if someone is in an irrigation district, is that the district who is the water right holder? Or do you need both signatures from the individual and the district?
I'm going to turn this over to Lisa Jaramillo because her team works more with irrigation districts.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Lisa Jaramillo for the record. With transfer applications, we require it's a separate form that the applicant locate the landowner within the irrigation district would provide to the district to say this is what we're proposing to do, and then the district would sign off on that if they're okay. So that's what we need to see to be able to proceed with the transfer.
Thank you.
Oh, I was wondering if the commission was interested in me talking about those categories.
I think we're probably good.
Yeah, I see it and I appreciate the
Yeah,
reference.
thank you for
but I see what you're
referencing
doing.
page 142. Commissioner Wolf has a question though.
Yeah, so is it just department policy or is it in rule or statute somewhere that a priority date is attached to the application submission date?
I thank you, Commissioner Wolf. I believe that is in both statute and rule. And so it is only established once we find that the application is complete. And so if somebody comes in the door and they don't fulfill the application completeness requirements, which are established in rule, I'll also add in there rules and statutes do allow us to ask for any additional information we need to complete our evaluation. But the team at the intake desk is looking to see, are all those completeness requirements met and have all the applicable fees been paid? And then they assign what we call a tentative priority date. And it's tentative because they don't have a permit yet at that point. But that's accurate. That's always when that's assigned. Thank you.
You're doing land use.
Oh, yes. Okay. So going back to where we're at in Division 310, and I do very much appreciate the questions. So we wanted to note that we're also proposing to update this division to improve consistency with our Division 5 rules, which conveniently we discussed a bit yesterday. And those rules describe how WRD determines that a requested water right transaction is compatible with land use requirements. The revisions remove language stating that the department can presume compatibility with land use requirements unless the local government has informed us otherwise. The revisions also remove the option for new water applications to be found complete by only including a receipt from the local government official, as this does not provide any information about land use compatibility. So as opposed to what we're expecting to see, which is a completed land use information form where the county or city official says the land use to be served by the proposed water use is allowed outright or requires discretionary approvals. And here's what the relevant ordinances are, and they've obtained it, or the land use approval has been denied, or it's being pursued or not being pursued. A receipt is just something at the bottom of the page that says we've received the request from the applicant, and it has no further information. And so that we don't believe that that's sufficient to meet our Division 5 requirements. So we're proposing to remove it.
Outside about this conversation, but at this point right here, that we yesterday's conversation, we might have talked about for a long time, it's really critical to look at. Because this unidirectional for the land use system for the water restrictions, and it could be flipped. That someone going in for a land use compatibility assessment first. Oh. Do I have to start all over? No, that's fine. Thanks for this is not directly related to this, but this nexus is what I think is so critical in this conversations with DLCD, because this is what I was talking about yesterday with the momentum. All of a sudden, the land use compatibility statement is here, and OWRD is almost compelled to issue a water right, where if the availability of water, the reasonable economic availability of water could be sent in the other direction as soon as someone applies for land use, I think we'd have far fewer conflicts. So I just want to put a pin in that for the rest of the commission to keep in mind going forward. I have no idea what it would take to flip the system on its head, but I think this is a critical juncture for that.
Vice Chair Smitherman and Commissioner, I think that through this rulemaking process, I think the importance of engaging on land use was really highlighted. We, through the RAC process, thought we were making a small change, and we became very aware that we were not to some folks, right? And so, and I think it showed that there really needs to be intentional conversations about this as it applies, not necessarily to what you were talking about, but also as it just applies to these rules, and what is our expectation when you come in for a water right? And so I do think that your point, if I'm taking your point and saying it really does mean that we need to have these conversations, both in the context of the state agency coordination plan that Alyssa Micken was talking about working on, but also in the context of our Division 5 rules. And so, we've lost that expertise over time around land use. Katie's now our resident expert, as is Alyssa. And I don't think Katie would claim to know everything, nor would Alyssa at this
I've done
point
a
in
lot of
time.
But not
Right. So I think there is an opportunity there. I am highlighting this now because land use was certainly one of the things that was still commented on in the public comment. And there is a desire for us to make additional changes to the rules. And we said we just can't do that right now because we do think it needs to be a holistic conversation. So you will see that when you get the documents later today.
I do know there was some concerns on Division 5, particularly with process that municipalities have to go through. And I think that you had taken that information into account as you were revising these rules. Is that right?
Yes, Vice Chair Smitherman, when you look at the comment, my recollection is that there was no longer concerns about the rules coming from those entities, and they submitted something saying that. I do think that there will be a need for further conversations because if you do look at our Division 5 rules, which are already law, there are certain requirements in there that say what we can and can't do in terms of issuance of a water right. So I think again, it points to that conversation really does need to be started because I do think based on what I'm hearing, it may be that our Division 5 rules may even create concerns for folks.
Right. Okay, thank you. It's good to hear that we're making those efforts to connect with those groups to understand better. Any more questions? No? Okay.
May I add
Continue.
on to the discussion?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. For the record, again, Katie Ratcliffe. So during the RAC process, part of what we had proposed was clarifying our completeness requirement and modifying it so that it was really clear to folks that what we need is for the information to come in on that land use information form. That is already what we do. That is our longstanding practice. And so we were clarifying that. That has been, since removed from the rules for that broader discussion that we discussed. And when we were working on the phrasing for that completeness requirement, there was a lot of commentary about creating really clear linkages to specific parts of Division 5, maybe even to the guide. So something that, was originally a pretty brief statement that I, from my perspective, was going to create a lot of clarity for an applicant turned into a whole paragraph. And so there's probably better ways to integrate feedback, but not have a long paragraph. And so, I thought we were getting closer there, but something that did create a lot of concern was an attempt at streamlining. And so 3 of the categories that I'll highlight that can create longer processing timelines for new water right applications is having to go back and forth on mapping requirements. So Division 305 will hopefully help processing of new water right applications. I believe it will. Admin holds is one we just spoke about. And another one is land use, because like I said, people can come in with an application right now showing that maybe they're pursuing the land use approval, or maybe they're not even pursuing it, but they've provided the land use information form. We take it in the door. And then we ask, would you provide evidence that you've received land use approval? And we ask and we ask. And sometimes people say, I don't need to provide that. I think you should issue a permit without knowing if this is compatible with land use requirements. And so the proposal was to require that information at the door, which then gets to your point, Commissioner Mall, is, are there any problems there? And that created a lot of concern from some of the RAC members. So we decided we were just stepping back from that discussion, looking forward to engaging, as we did yesterday, the start of a broader conversation about the intersection of land use and water use. But the 122, I believe, form comments, that people submitted were expressing concern that we had pulled back from some of those steps that we were trying to take for ensuring that we knew that land use requirements were met at the time the application came in.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
Thank you, Katie.
of course. So much more we could say about land use, but I know we need to move on. So Division 315, we're moving now into the extensions part of the process. As a reminder, water right permits set a deadline for completing construction of water infrastructure such as pipelines and for putting that water to beneficial use. An extension allows somebody who holds a water right permit more time to finalize these steps. House Bill 3342 set limitations on the number and length of extensions of time. And these limits are non-discretionary and must be implemented through this rulemaking. Because of the new limitation on the length of extensions, the proposed rules would remove checkpoint conditions. These conditions currently apply to extension requests exceeding 5 years and require the permit holder to update the department on how development under their water use permit is progressing. So while the proposed rules would no longer explicitly require us to impose checkpoint conditions, we propose to keep language that maintains the department's authority to condition an extension order to periodically document the continued need for the project if we believe that that is necessary and appropriate. The rules add information about how the proposed final order on the extension application may initiate permit cancellation proceedings if an extension is denied and the requirements for cancellation are met. So I'll pause there. I know there's a lot going on with extensions, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, I think I'd highlight the checkpoint conditions as one of the ones we're modifying our approach right now. So since we touched on it, the checkpoint conditions is one of the ones that we did receive some comment on in particular and made a modification to retain that ability to condition, but not to for check-ins, right? But not necessarily to have it be a mandatory checkpoint condition. So you'll see that in the draft of the rules.
Yeah, thank you, Raquel. And I'll add to that part of the reason why we think that removing the strict requirement that we impose checkpoint conditions for any extension requests over 5 years is because not just the number and length of extensions has dramatically shrunk in terms of what people can obtain, but for some of those longer requests, such as quasi-municipal use permits, those require, in almost all cases, there's one exception there, that a water management and conservation plan be provided. And that provides the same level of information, or actually quite a bit more than a checkpoint condition would. So we believe we're reducing duplication. But like I said, there's an exception there where smaller QM use rights may not need a WMCP unless we determine upon review that it should be imposed. So we're retaining that language in there that allows us to require some sort of progress report if we want.
And Commissioners, QM stands for quasi-municipal. So.
I didn't say that. Thank you. It's all the jargon. Thank you. Moving into Division 340, I know that's a pretty broad title there, water use authorizations. It contains a number of different topics, but the one I'll focus on, because this is where the most notable change is that we're proposing, is pertaining to rules governing the expedited secondary process for use of stored water. So these are requests for new water use rights and new permits, but there's an expedited process that the legislature created specifically for use of stored water. And the changes we're proposing would provide greater clarity on how the department determines that a public comment has raised or identified a public interest issue that merits moving the application out of the expedited process and into the standard review process. The intent is to provide greater clarity following recent litigation. So the impact when we move from the expedited process to the standard review process is that instead of going directly to final order after, of course, notice and public comment, is that we issue, if we have an expedited secondary application, we then go to a proposed final order, and there's an opportunity for requesting contested case, and then we would go to final order depending on how the process plays out. Okay. Division 77 contains our rules for in-stream water right applications. In addition to implementing 2025 legislation, the 77 rules implement 2023 legislation. This legislation allows a water right permit holder to split their use of water, or I'm sorry, a water right holder, so a certificate holder, to split their use of water within the same year, to use water under the water right for part of the year, and lease water in stream for another part of the year. The Division 77 rules clarify that any rule or order withdrawing a natural lake or stream from further allocation does not withdraw it for in-stream public uses unless the rule or order specifically states that it is prohibiting in-stream public uses, or the water body was withdrawn for the exclusive use of a municipality. The rules would remove the process for canceling an in-stream water right based on non-use. The rules would be removed due to conflicts with rule and statute, and because it's really unclear how WRD would ever determine that an in-stream water use has been forfeited. Water is remaining in the stream. How do you determine that's been forfeit?
I will note for the commission, the statute does actually have a provision for forfeiting in-stream water rights. So, but the rules do have problems, so we're going to remove those.
This is one I actually caught in the pre-reading. So what it made me think of are emergency situations. We have the big quake, for example, and stream flow changes so dramatically that it's no longer there, or a municipality needs, there's no other alternative because of change. And I don't know enough about how, cataclysmic emergency tosses all the rules out, but I just wondered if in that case, would we regret not having a clear forfeiture statute rule? Does that make sense?
Commissioners, I don't think that. So the standard of forfeiture is 5 years of non-use, right? It's not, oh, we have an emergency and now we don't want this water right to exist. And that's not necessarily, maybe that's what you're saying, maybe that's not. But so it's still the same standard of forfeiture, which would be 5 years of non-use.
So if we get rid of the standard of forfeiture, it actually becomes easier to do something in an emergency situation then?
Chair Smitherman, Commissioner, I think that I would separate the two. There are provisions, for example, related to drought and in-stream. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. That's maybe a first in front of this commission. But so I would separate the two. And if that is something that is of concern, I would say get separate authority for it. Forfeiture is a very well-established principle in prior appropriation that is about not using this water right. And so I would suggest that it's probably if what you're talking about, if we're going to get really nuanced, is more like abandonment. If you wanted to permanently cancel a water right because the holder is wanting to do that themselves. So I just don't think that forfeiture is the avenue that I would be looking at in terms of the concern you have. I think there's other ways to get there without forfeiture.
Great. Abandonment makes much more sense. Thank you.
Newman?
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that I didn't think of this in our earlier discussion, but there are defenses to forfeiture also that would protect in-stream or other rights in situations like this. So, it's a defense to forfeiture that the water wasn't available or that you couldn't, or that there was too much water available. So I think that covers these situations as well.
Thank you, Commissioners Mall and Newman. And Vice Chair, if I might add on to the conversation. So one critical distinction between in-stream water rights certificates and other certificates is in-stream water rights certificates are held by the state. They're held by WRD in trust for the public. And so be kind of an interesting situation for us to find that the water in stream is not being used and that it's been forfeit. So it's kind of an odd situation. And so we're proposing it to remove it from rule for a variety of reasons. But Commissioner Mall, to your point, for limited license statutes, there is an opportunity for someone to, in a Cascadia type situation, something that's a really clear emergency to all of us, to obtain a limited license application. And so we're fortunate that we haven't entered that circumstance yet, but I have had folks reach out to me and ask, in an emergency like that, what could we do? Okay. All right, thank you. Other elements of Division 77 updates to align with existing statutes, the rules remove estimated average natural flow as a limitation on the amount of water that can be protected in stream for transfers, leases, and allocation of conserved water projects. It doesn't remove it where it currently is for as a limitation for new in-stream water right applications requested by state agencies. Because we believe we have statutory authority to maintain those limitations that are in rule. Our proposed rules for minimum perennial stream flow conversions would add language from statute describing how minimum perennial stream flows established before June 25th, 1988 shall be converted to in-stream water rights. The rules would align the steps to complete these conversions with the process described in statute, which includes a proposed final order step. And turning it over to Lisa.
Great, thank you, Katie. Let's see, so continuing on with Division 77, the proposed rules provide clarity that the department may only issue in-stream water rights, in-stream leases, in-stream transfers, and in-stream water rights resulting from an allocation of conserved water project for stream reaches that are located within Oregon's borders. Changes were also made to clarify that storage rights may be permanently transferred in stream, provided certain criteria are met. And further changes were made to align certain definitions with other rule divisions, clean up obsolete definitions, and add or update existing definitions for greater clarity. To streamline processes for both the applicant and the department, for in-stream leases where the lessor is a district, the proposed rules allow written authorization from each district user involved in the lease to be maintained at the district and available upon request, instead of the district having to provide this information with the lease application. The proposed rules add a streamlined process to renew an in-stream lease if it meets the criteria, such as the renewal application is submitted within 5 years from the date of expiration, set in the last final order approving the lease, and that it does not propose any changes to the in-stream use or quantity of water protected. Related to precedents of future uses, our existing rules provide a process for applicants for certain types of new water rights to request the new water right take priority over an existing in-stream water right. The proposed rules were modified to align with statute and to follow the water right application processing steps. Next slide. Okay, next we have Division 325, and Raquel alluded to this earlier, but we commonly commonly refer to this as our split a permit process. Many of the changes in this rule division are to implement the 2025 legislation, clarify the existing rules, and to create consistency across rule divisions by implementing an initial review phase of processing, which includes preparation of draft replacement permits so that applicants can review them before they become final. The rules make several other changes to align to statute or other rules. The biggest change being that the department can approve an application for splitting a permit even if the completion date for that permit is expired. This is pursuant to a review of the text of the statute.
So commissioners, I want to make sure we dig in on this one because this is one of the ones we did receive some comments on, right? And so if you look at the statute, it says that a water rate holder or permit holder, where are we at? We're at permits. Okay, so a permit holder can apply for this split a permit if they have an unexpired completion date. So that means that if it expires while it's being processed, that's okay, but it has to come in the door unexpired. Now, we received comments that was really focused on the original permit completion date and that we should not allow it if they had an extension completion date. And in our mind, there is no distinction in the statute. So you'll see our response on that. But that was some of the comments that we had received is from our standpoint, if they have a valid completion date, regardless of where it's at in the process, right? If it's under a permit or original permit or under an extension, that this process can be utilized. But that was some of the comments that we did receive as of late.
Commissioner Mall.
Can you just give me an example of when this would happen? I can kind of imagine the different motivations people are for or against here, but I'm having trouble understanding when would somebody do that? When would you be reaching the end of your permit period and all of a sudden feel like you couldn't perfect the water rights, so you would split it? What are we talking about?
So split a permit is, I think it was introduced because you may have, a water right is associated with land, right? And then suddenly, let's say you have a subdivision of that land and, Joe owns half of that land now and Julie owns the other half. And let's say in that scenario, Julie has put all of her water to use, but Julie can't prove up on the permit because Joe has not put any water to use, let's say.
Sorry. Yeah.
Right?
Not good neighbors.
That is the particular instance that is helpful, right, for the split a permit. And so you can imagine that it may be on an extension, it may be on the original completion date, but either way, in that instance, one of you may be ready to go and say, no, I want to prove up, but I can't because there's this piece that can't be proved up on, right? So that's, I think, the situation that it was intended for. Lisa, did I get that?
You've got that perfectly right.
Great example. Thank you. Follow up. Commissioner Newman.
I just want to make sure, something that Raquel said earlier kind of raised a flag for me when you said, I know what a splitting a permit is. I don't know what an assignment is. You still need both. And there may be, I noticed a couple of places where you might want to say assignment or splitting a permit in the rules. And I can follow up with you on that because assignments are frequently used in large land purchases where there may be certificated water rights, permits, applications, and so forth. And as the new buyer is coming in, the certificate automatically comes with the property. The permit or the applications have to be assigned. And so there's still an important piece for assignments without actually splitting any permits. So I just wanted to raise that.
Commissioner, I appreciate that point. And Lisa, this is where, because I am not in the weeds all the time, right? The assignments piece, 325 is about the split a permit. There is separate provisions that you're discussing in statute that are around assignments of a permit, right? In the statute, it says assignment for the one you're talking about.
Right.
And then it also says assignment for this split a permit one. So every time I see assignments, I'm like, I don't know, what is that? Why, how do you get to split a permit with it, because they're using the same terms. And so this one is really focused on that statute that allows splitting a permit. There is a different statute that's also called assignments. So Lisa, did I get that? Yeah.
Yeah, they're under two different statutory authorities. So we still maintain the assignment of a permit to update the ownership. And then this is a separate authority to assign and split the
split.
permit. So it's now two separate permits
And are there two separate rule divisions or there will?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Then I'm happy. Thank you.
So that said, if you do think we missed it, please let us know, right? And we're happy to take a look at it. But this is why this one confuses me, because I think the title should be split a permit because then I know what we're talking about.
Yep. All right.
Yes, Commissioner Lee has a question.
Yes, I know splitting a permit is hard for individuals, but for districts, it's much, much harder. And I wonder if there's any provisions that will help with that.
This authority does not, it's very specific on the types of permits and holders of permits that can apply. It doesn't allow municipal rights and I think it's municipal corporations. So it's got to be for like non-municipal uses. If I had the rule in front of me, I could tell you real quick.
Okay.
But it's, you happen to have that, Raquel?
I'm working on it. It'll be
Yes, that's what I have.
It's 3250020, I think.
Yeah.
Pages.
Page 160.
So yes, it's 0020 subsection 2. And what is not included in here is municipal water rates, quasi-municipal water rates, or water rate permits held by a unit of local government, which includes but is not limited to Port Water Authority or a district. So this that is in statute, by the way. So this is mirroring statute, and this program is not intended for that.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you for the question. Okay. All right. Division 18 is our allocation of conserved water rules, and it's a voluntary program that allows water that is conserved through implementation of permanent physical changes to infrastructure to be used on other lands. The program requires at least 25% of the conserved water to be dedicated to the state, and it's usually for in-stream purposes. These rules are mostly to align with legislation and to create consistency in processes across rule divisions, particularly for processing steps. The changes also provide clarity around existing processes, such as that any change in point of diversion can only be made from the same source of water, and the department does require water use measuring and reporting. Finally, many of the changes in Division 18 clarify or reorganize the rules to reflect the various steps associated with a conserved water project. First, if all the requirements are met, the conserved water project is approved. The next phase for the applicant is to complete the changes, which is followed by a testing phase to confirm the amount of water conserved, and then there's finalization of the project. We can either go through this process with 3 separate steps, or if they've completed implementation of the conservation measures, no more than in the last 5 years, they could come in with all three of those things done at once, and we issue kind of a full meal deal order on that.
So on Division 18, the comments that we received quite a bit on were groundwater in specifically. And so Lisa, I'm going to go based on memory here, so you can chime in when I go awry. But so with this rulemaking process, a couple of years ago, before we even started this rulemaking process, we were asked the question, does allocation of conserved water apply to groundwater? And interestingly enough, the answer is yes. So if you go back to the original statutes, the statutes pointed to surface water rights and groundwater rights. And then we had the gift that keeps giving, which is that change in the law, water use subject to transfer, which has caused so much fodder for different legal questions. But and so it's changed over time. But the original statute did contemplate both. And so we had been, it's not very common, but we have processed allocations of conserved water for groundwater. We don't have authority to put groundwater in stream, right? So the result is that conserved portion that goes to the state is canceled. And so we brought this to the RAC and we had it in very plain, clear language and called out. And there was significant concerns from portions of the RAC about this. So we pulled it back while also knowing that the statute does allow for this. And so the revisions to the rules mirror the statute to maintain the ability for the department to do this, knowing that we probably need to have some additional conversations with folks and not necessarily saying exactly all of the steps that will occur, you know, that are very explicit on groundwater. But if you look at the statute, it talks about the state's portion. And so essentially we've tried to leave it so there's the ability for us to have additional conversations and not, you know, outright say this is how it's going to happen. But also the result of that is we received a lot of comments saying, thank you for pulling this out. And I want to make sure that folks know that we still have the authority to do this, right? And the rules do still allow it. So we will be taking a look at the rules to make sure that we threaded that needle. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge there's a desire, I think, and there's concerns around this issue. At the same time, we know what the statute said at the time it was passed. And so that is one of those big policy issues where we got to make a decision, right, on that. So Lisa, do you have anything to add on that front?
I would just add that related to the state's portion when it's a groundwater right involved in the project. So the state's portion of the conserved water is canceled. So basically it's in the aquifer for the next user to access. We can't actively protect it.
Commissioner Mall.
So this seems like a really rich area for almost new legal precedent when we start looking at permissible total withdrawal. Because if it's canceled, it doesn't figure in the PTW calculation, but conceivably, if it was held in the same way that an in-stream right would, it would factor into the PTW because it would be a part of the total that actually couldn't be withdrawn. If we're looking at it from a balance, am I thinking about that right? Those of you with legal backgrounds?
Commissioner Newman.
I think it's arguable. I mean, I think a water user could say, oh, look, you know, conserved water projects have put X amount of water back in the aquifer. Therefore, we should make these other adjustments in a critical groundwater area in PTW or something else. But I think it would be a case by case argument.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it the flip, that the state if the state's, if conserved water goes toward groundwater, that should essentially be a part of the total the total bucket, but it's
Right.
off limits. And so the net PTW usable above ground should get reduced. Wow, maybe we shouldn't, yeah.
Yeah. Chairs, Commissioner, I think, so PTW isn't necessarily though based on the water rate amount. It's based on what is actually able to meet and this is where Ivan's the expert, so I'm going to look to him. So I think there's a little bit of, I would split those two out. One's about the resource, one's about the water rates. And Ivan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, Commissioner Mall, thanks for the question. It's a good one. It's a little bit about two different accounting systems. You know, there's water that we've allocated to various groundwater rights in a particular basin. And then there is the sustainable amount of groundwater that we can pump out of a basin or aquifer system on an annual basis that we would equate to the PTW in the case of the Harney Basin there. And those are different things. If a water right holder were to go through an allocation of conserved water process and reduce their pumpable amount of water on their water right by a certain amount, that would reduce the overall allocation in that basin and would help move the water right portfolio closer to the PTW on that. You know, our best approach right now is that we aren't protecting groundwater that's left in the aquifer system through any process. We don't have that. Zach Fried with Nature Conservancy has raised the issue over the years of sort of an in situ groundwater right to be protectable. We haven't had a lot of time to research other policies around the nation to see what other folks are doing there, but we really get at protecting what's in the aquifer through the allocation process, or ultimately in Harney at the other end of the spectrum through that control mechanism or mechanisms to reduce what's been allocated and bring that closer to the PTW. So I hope that kind of helps answer the question there.
Yeah, I guess I'm remembering now that Zach had brought this up before, because I still think it begs the question, if long term our interest is reasonably stable aquifer, this maybe we already have a step towards having that mechanism towards in situ water rights, groundwater rights. I don't want to derail. I know you've got a lot more to go, but I'm just a flag. I do think it's an area worthy of some more research and consideration.
Commissioner Mall, yeah, and I just say the other complication there is sort of in the measurement. We measure allocation in rate and duty. We measure stability of the aquifer and water level elevations. So they're different things, and trying to accommodate that, you know, we really wouldn't protect a particular rate in an aquifer. It would be more of a volumetric protection, which would equate to the water level elevation. And so we'll have to figure out a way to kind of adjust that if the commission would like us to pursue that. But it's an interesting exercise. I will say that the allocation of conserved water is, again, another tool that can help move us towards the PTW there.
Follow-up question from Commissioner Wolf, and then we'll go to Commissioner Lee.
If I'm thinking about it correctly, didn't we sort of inadvertently protect that? So somebody conserves water, goes back to the state cancels that portion of the water right, and then through the application process, when we changed the determination of water availability, then if there's water available, then a new water right should be able to be issued and put to beneficial use. And if we mistakenly had continually awarded water right certificates in an area where water was not available, but the answer was, I don't know, haven't we sort of protected that through the back door of the application process?
Vice Chair Smitham and Commissioner Wolf, the new allocation rules certainly are going to be more protective of better allocation processes that are going to protect the groundwater resource and not drive us towards over allocation there. So yeah, you're definitely correct there. I'm trying to think of a scenario where we would have an ACW of groundwater, and it would be allocatable again, in areas where we have the data to suggest that water is available and we don't have the hydraulic connection issues with surface water. I think that might be an example. So.
Great. Commissioner Lee?
Yes, if we're still discussing this, I can bring up my question later because it's not related to the state's portion. And I haven't read Division 18 yet, so I don't know if the issue is resolved, but from a field perspective, working on the ground in an irrigation district with conserved water, it was always a little tedious to go through the process, and I'm wondering if some of that might be corrected. I saw a couple comments from the RAC that maybe this division should be developed more fully in a separate rulemaking process if we were to adopt what we have now. And then if it's determined that there still would be some work to be done, perhaps it could come back at a later time.
Commissioners, I think that is correct. The focus, we did not go into this rulemaking thinking we were going to solve every issue with Division 18. We went into this rulemaking ensuring that we were implementing the legislation, right? And unfortunately, because of how the program is structured, does mean that there's a lot of changes that had to be incorporated there, right? Because you have these different steps in the process that you don't have elsewhere. And then as a result of that, some of it also looks like bigger changes because my recollection is we moved a big slice of the rule down into a different area just so it was more manageable, I think, and made a better flow, right? So there's some of those kinds of things. I do think that there's potentially in the future, yes, there should be another look. This isn't trying to solve all of the issues, right? When we started this rulemaking, we were looking particularly at 380 and Division 77, and the other ones were more, what do we need to do in terms of the legislation? What are some of the obvious things, right? Like the fact that some things don't align with statute at all, right? Because it's changed. Those are the kinds of things that, we took the opportunity to clarify, knowing that we weren't going to address every single policy issue. So we tried, but, it's a pretty big rulemaking to try to do every single thing that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing that we did try to structure the process so that it was clear if you do the 1-step, 2-step, 3-step process, we laid things out accordingly, or if you came in completely done and we do 1, 2, and 3 in the same order, it accommodated that. So we tried to lay that out a little more clearly. All right, it's time to look at Division 380 for the water right transfers. And most of these items listed here have been discussed in context of other rules, so we're just going to keep moving. Let's see, the clarification of, let's see, this is not, let's see, sorry about that. For 380, we did several changes. So the department reviews both injury and enlargement when evaluating a change, and the proposed rules make that very clear. The changes establish a more efficient process for renewing a temporary transfer. And the changes establish new rules for permit amendments. So the department's been operating without rules ever since the program was established, and this will codify existing practices and align to extent possible, the process with other transfer rules for consistency purposes. So we're pretty excited to actually have some permit amendment rules. Okay, next slide.
Just one clarification of direct consideration.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we've also got, sorry about that, modifying the clarification of water rights. The proposed rule divisions delegate authority to the department to issue a final order after a contested case hearing, even when exceptions to the administrative law judge's proposed order are timely filed. And I don't know if we have anything else to add to that.
So I think I think this is a policy question for the commission, is that there are certain portions of these rules where we move to the director making the final decision. And that's for you all to decide, right? And I think the reason that we've proposed it is that you all see all the work that goes into, right? When you all have to make a decision and get up to date on it and review all the paperwork and all of that to make those decisions. So this is one of those questions that I think at the end of the day is the commission has delegated its authority in many instances, but not all. This is one of the ones that has not been. Forfeiture is the other one. And I need to go back and so we should make a note of this for the final meeting. Is there's one change that we are making because the statute says it's the director, not the commission, that makes the decision. And then there's other ones where you all have the discretion to say, we want to retain that or we want to put it on the director. So, and I'm not remembering which one's the one that said that we actually have said no, like the statute actually says the commission does not have authority, that it's the director that does. So I don't believe it's this one, but.
And just to provide a little more context here, the clarification of water rights, that process is basically, say you have a 40-acre quarter section and the water right says there are 10 acres of irrigation, but we don't know where that is. There's nothing that shows exactly where it is. So the clarification process allows us to go from this ambiguous area down to clarifying this is where those 10 acres are. Right. Okay, so moving on, additional rule amendments for permanent transfers clarify that if the change under a point of diversion or a point of appropriation transfer is not made in the time specified, the transfer holder can request to revert the point of diversion or appropriation back to its original location prior to the transfer. And the proposed rules also clarify that for place of use changes involving water rights with an authorized place of use tied to specific acreage, such as an irrigation right, the water right acreage identified for the place of use transfer must actually move to a new location. In other words, a place of use transfer should not include any acreage that is staying in the same place. So we've gotten applications where it's a, say, 20-acre irrigation right. They pick the whole thing up and they put it down, and maybe only 5 acres is actually moving to a new location. So we're wanting people to just pick up what they are actually moving to a new location.
And Lisa, I think this one I can understand applicants that want to do this, right? Because instead of having to draw, this is the part that we're moving specifically, they can say, no, this is the part we're moving, right? So I understand why there's a desire for that. If you look though at the definition of enlargement, for example, you're not irrigating the same place of use, right? You have to dry up the lands. And so it creates these issues when you're looking at the transfer criteria.
Mhm.
So it is one of those where I understand the reasons why folks do that. And at the same time, it does create some issues on the approvals front.
Commissioner Newman?
I have a question that's maybe unrelated to that particular point, but related to the transfers. Years and years ago, when conversions to in-stream rights from consumptive rights were first being discussed, like when the Water Trust first submitted applications, there were issues about if you had an irrigation right with a specific season and rate of diversion, and the transfer to in-stream right requested lower rate but longer time period. I just don't recall where we are on that issue at this point, so that's just to remind me where we are.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Newman. So for the most part, we are sticking to the season that's authorized in the water right. So except in rare circumstances that increase of season could result in new diversions of water outside what was originally occurring and allowed. So we're keeping that season the same to prevent expansion and possible injury.
Thank you.
Okay, so still on Division 380. These rules make several changes to the program that allows for changes in the point of diversion to reflect historical use. And this is where a point of diversion has been in use for 10 or more years. The changes make the review process clearer, including the process for evaluating injury and enlargement. And the statute requires the applicant to notify other potentially affected water right holders. And the rules clarify that process, including that the applicant must provide proof that the notification occurred. In addition to other changes, the rules make it clear that this process cannot be used for groundwater rights or changing the location of a dam. And while it appears to the department that groundwater was not contemplated by the statute, OWRD is conducting a deeper review of the legislative history to confirm. Finally, the changes for housekeeping summarize some of the additional changes captured in the rulemaking, and many of these changes are to align with existing statute and have already been discussed, or were codifying current agency practice.
So commissioners, I'll point out on this groundwater piece and whether it applies to this POD changes to reflect historical use. We did look at the legislative history. Legislative history is not always the clearest on these things, right? But if you look at the statute itself, the statute is very focused on surface water. If you look at the context around why this would be allowed, right? It's because the water, all the other water right holders theoretically should know it's happening, because if someone is taking water from a stream, right, and it's a problem, you would probably know that, right? We know that that's not true on groundwater all the time, right? The other piece to it, which I think is points more towards this being limited to surface water, is there's a statute that's in ORS 537, part of the groundwater code. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but that statute applies certain provisions of the transfers, ORS 540, to groundwater. It does not apply 540, what is it, 532, which is the historic PODs provisions. So all signs from my standpoint are that this is really a statute that is about surface water. So that is where we will be recommending the commission go. And I think, it's interesting because, so at some point we might need to just run legislation to fully integrate groundwater into the transfers, right? Because you have this weird statute in ORS 537 that's like, oh, and by the way, 540, 520, and 530 also apply to groundwater. Right. And so that when you look at the statute, all it talks about is points of diversion, because points of appropriation are back over in 537, which is new water rights, right? Okay. So anyways, that is a history of probably how the groundwater code was adopted, but it is one of those things where when you just look at the statute, you have to go digging somewhere else. So. Sure.
So one of the differences, or as I understand it, the main differences between going through this process, the historical POD change and a regular transfer, is that the historical POD process means that someone wouldn't have to go through a newspaper notice and they wouldn't need to hire a CWRE. But as Raquel was pointing out, it's probably more obvious to someone that somebody's pulling water from a different place on a stream. It's probably easier to see the changes in the stream level than it is for seeing those changes, over a shorter period of time from a shift in where somebody's well is. So that seemed to be another indicator for us that maybe it's okay to not have a newspaper notice for historical POD change for surface water. It makes a little less sense for groundwater. So that's another part of the evaluation.
And we'll just note, though, that newspaper notice is going away with the new legislation.
For the most part.
For the most part, yes.
It's a newspaper.
Yeah, regarding notice for the historic point of diversion transfers. So when we get one of these, one of the things we have to do is identify all of the potentially affected water rights. And so we provide a list of those water rights and the holders of the water rights, contact information, and give that to the applicant. And then the applicant has to go serve notice on all of those people and then tell us, okay, we did it. So there have been some bumps in the road along the way, processing things where either not everybody got notice, or it wasn't clear, or we had to go help deliver at times. And so what we've done is to incorporate that the notice has to be sent by certified or registered mail with return receipt, and then we get copies of the return receipt so we know it happened. All right. Groundwater registrations, these are claims for groundwater rights that predate 1955 and have not been adjudicated. The process for making changes to a groundwater registration are authorized by statute, but specified in rule. Most of the changes try to align with the Division 380 transfer rules so that there's consistency and hopefully efficiencies that go along with that. So as such, most of these items have already been discussed in the other rule divisions. One area to highlight is that House Bill 2803 increased the maximum fee that could be charged for groundwater registration modifications. The current fee was set at what was formerly the maximum fee for all applications for GR modifications. except when it was only a change in the place of use. Those were set at 70% of the maximum fee. So the rule change now points to statute instead of writing the actual fee number in the rule as was done in the past. So it will just adjust as the statute is adjusted. And currently the fee, this would mean a fee of $1,900, which is 70% of the max fee. And that would be for a place of use change only. And then all other types of changes or combinations of changes would be the maximum fee at $2,730 for a groundwater registration modification. Let's see.
So commissioners, on this one, we have changed it from saying the actual number to a percent. So that way we don't have to keep doing this. So
yeah, we the other thing to note is that again we have made some similar changes with terminology to align with the new statute and the other processes.
On this particular one, we received comments around evidence of use. And so normally on a transfers process, we require evidence of use that the water right's been used in the past 5 years. With groundwater, and that comes from the basis of forfeiture rate. And we have not historically required that for groundwater registration modifications. Through this rulemaking, there's been some comments on that, and we're probably going to continue to recommend not applying it at this point in time. I think that requires further policy conversation about it. But the piece on that is that you might recall these are groundwater registrations. What are groundwater registrations? Those are basically groundwater code water rates. Okay. So we've got surface water registrations, groundwater registrations, and those are not finally determined water rates. They have not gone through the adjudication process. ORS 540, 610 through 660, which is forfeiture, applies to those water rates that are finally determined, right? So that is one of the issues, though, that you'll see that came up in the public comment in particular.
To add on to that, when we evaluate a modification application and decide to approve it, we're very clear that we are just recognizing the change, and at some point in the future, the court's going to make the final decision.
So if someone had not used their water right and that water right should be canceled, that would go through the adjudication process.
Commissioner Newman, did you have a question? Okay.
Okay, did we miss Division 77? Gosh, we were just having so much fun that I already forgot about it. Okay, well, Division 17. So Division 17 is forfeiture, cancellation of perfected water rights. So these rule changes specify that the director instead of the commission, so this is one of the ones that'll be a question for you all if you want to maintain that, will consider exceptions to an administrative law judge's final order instead of the commission. The rule also specifies that when forfeiture is asserted as part of a transfer proceeding protest, OWRD will issue a notice of cancellation proceeding to provide the notice required by the forfeiture statutes, but not require the water right holder to submit a protest, instead addressing the matter of forfeiture in the transfer proceeding. So I'm going to come back to that one because I think that's one we should discuss in addition. So the first two that I've mentioned, I think are worth us making sure we talk about a little bit more. The rule also modifies the process by which a water master submits an affidavit for 5 years in a row. So this is kind of a separate forfeiture process, stating that to the best of their knowledge, there's no physical way the water may be applied to a beneficial use. And it modifies that by providing a broader scope of information that may be used to support that affidavit. Right now, it just says, put the date of the field inspection. And it may be that there's a broader set of information, not just this field inspection, that is what we are relying on. For a different cancellation process, the changes also remove the requirement that OWRD staff submit an affidavit to us. So we would be submitting an affidavit to ourselves, which we've always found to be an interesting requirement of the rules. So as a reminder, the department, when we, all of our orders need to be based on a preponderance of evidence, right? So that is the standard, and that's why we think this is kind of an odd provision here, these affidavits. The department will then issue the proposed final order, which must meet the statute and the rule requirements. And so we just don't, at this point, see the need for that affidavit to ourselves. And then finally, the rules also make updates to clarify the information the department can use. So with regards to the information the department can use, there's a whole list of things the department can use in the rule, and it says including but not limited to. And then it provides this list. We've added to the list evapotranspiration as well as satellite imagery is being items we can use as part of a forfeiture proceeding. There's been some concerns about that. At the same time, if we were to remove it, we feel like that would be disingenuous because the rule says including but not limited to, right? So us removing it doesn't prohibit us from using it. So we think it's still important to be transparent about the types of information that could be used. So that was one of the items that there was some comment on. The other items that I do want to go back to are the first two, which I don't believe we received any comments on the first one, but this is my own conscience wanting to flag when the department is proposing something that says, Commission, you don't have to make these decisions anymore. The department will, right? So that's the first one I want to make sure we do a gut check on with all of you. The second one then is the process when forfeiture is raised as a part of a transfer protest. And we talked with you all about this in December, where we have this oddity in that when you transfer, you can only transfer a valid water right. And so in a transfer proceeding, this question of forfeiture comes up. Well, so what happens when forfeiture comes up in a transfer proceeding? Do you stop the transfer and then go and start a forfeiture proceeding separately, go through a contested case on forfeiture, and then restart the transfer process and then go through potentially another contested case on the transfer? Or do you say, okay, it's been raised as part of the forfeiture or as part of the transfer process, so we're going to, that will be a matter that is part of the transfer proceeding. And so what we're trying to do is pull those in to be together. It's not perfect. The statute doesn't seem to see these connections very well, so we have attempted to do that. So there's still some concerns on that piece, but we still think it's what makes sense, because I think you all have just had a decision before you where that happened, right? And so, and you could see how it'd be confusing because you have the forfeiture proceeding and then you go back into the transfer proceeding, right? So that issue is still out there. We're still proposing to keep it because we still think it makes sense to just do it all at once. But at the same time, we understand that it does make folks concerned because we don't have a way to say, you know what, we don't think this water rate has been forfeited in a if it's asserted during the transfers process, that's an issue that's part of that contested case, right? Regardless. And yet, if it goes through that transfer proceeding without any of the notice for forfeiture, that also is then like, well, that's not what the statute contemplates. So it's a bit of a pickle for us, right? And we're trying to make that clear through the rules. And So that one still remains an issue in there, but we're proposing to continue on as it's proposed in our previous drafts of the rules. So if you all have any thoughts on either one of those things, we certainly would be happy to hear that and hear if you all have any direction for us to consider as we continue to get you a final draft of the rules.
Commissioner Newman?
Thank you. I think it makes perfect sense to collapse them or consolidate them. So I'm in favor of that. Combined with the proposal to keep the final order at the director level, I'm just checking. So the matter that we considered in December down in Southern Oregon, where there was a few transfer proceedings and a couple of different cancellation starts and stops, that would not have come before the commission at all, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Mm.
So people need to be comfortable with that.
Yes, Commissioner, that's why I want to point it out, because I do think it's, important for you all to consciously make that decision if you would like that.
Commissioner Lee had her hand up.
Same question.
Okay, yes. Commissioner Mall?
A time check. Are we okay time-wise in terms of the amount of
Yes,
material
we're
you
at
still want to cover?
10:05, and I think we have about 5 minutes more of slides. So we've got about 25 minutes here.
Yeah, in terms of the gut check on something like this, the fact that I can only think of in my tenure this coming up like this one time. If it's the kind of thing that would similarly only come up in really rare cases and therefore draw reasonable questions about department process and history. I mean, that was something that went for years and had different department staff, and I think former department staff involved in that kind of stuff. If it is something that would really only come up as a relatively rare occasion, then it does seem to me that it's warranted to bring it before the commission. If it's something that, given the rule changes, we're going to start to encounter more and more and more, and simply keeping up with the technical aspects of the law and implementation, then I'm much more in favor of giving the director that authority and discretion.
I think you make a good point, Commissioner Mall, on the changes that are being proposed, and will that increase the number of cases that we'll be seeing?
So Commissioner, I'm going to ask Ivan to chime in here, because we do have, I would set aside the rules itself and let's talk about what's occurring in the state right now or one of the basins.
Vice Chair Smitherman and Commissioner Mall, members of the commission, great question there and observation. These have been relatively rare occurrences across the state. Many of the cancellation proceedings I've been involved with over the years, and it's a small number, have been initiated by folks outside the agency against neighbors for one reason or another. And what's changing, first and foremost, is our work in the Harney critical groundwater area down there. We have been asked by groundwater users themselves and members of the community to come in and clean up the paper water rights of record that haven't been developed or exercised. And so that's going to be a focus of ours following the rule adoption in December. One of the things that the Field Services Division is going to be taking a lead on is to do that assessment and start to work towards partial or full cancellations of groundwater rights that have never been developed or haven't been used in a number of years there that meet those forfeiture standards. And so we expect the numbers to go up. I don't know what the specifics are there, but this will be represent a shift where the agency is now taking a more proactive approach in that particular basin, and may expand that out as staff and time are available in other parts of the basin. But our focus is going to be on the groundwater rights in the critical area in the upcoming few years.
That's
Commissioner Mall?
Yes. That's helpful, and that makes me lean more towards giving the director that authority. I think that you could always, it seems like something that could, if it got wildly out of hand and we got a number of public comments, we could always rein that in at some level, right?
Vice Chair Smitherman, Commissioner Mall, That's certainly correct. We can revisit this, and I think it would be prudent for the department to provide the commission with regular updates on how that's proceeding.
The alternative would be is you don't adopt this rule and you instead do a delegation order. And a delegation order is easier to pull back than a rule, right? You would need to change the rule versus with a delegation order, you delegate authority to the director and then you just issue a new order saying mine. So, right. So that is an alternative that you could do.
Would it, sorry,
Commissioner Mull, go ahead.
would it be out of hand to ask for some DOJ consultation on this and just in terms of risk assessment of what's the likelihood that delegating would end up in greater protest in case and ultimately drag things down versus a delegation order or something like that? Is that out of line to look for that kind of guidance from DOJ?
No, we can certainly ask the question and get that, who's my note taker here, and get that back to you all. I've never heard that there's a difference, but we can certainly ask that question.
Any other commissioners have comments? I suppose I'm feeling a bit torn on the issue of not having commission oversight, at least as we're getting started and moving forward with potential increased cases in Harney County. Just given that community and talking about how we would be involved and helping in the process moving forward with them and not just completely stepping back, but providing them with another body to push or to have reviewing the cases and the issues. Sorry, but I so that's how I'm feeling, and then as we started to move forward and we see that these cases are pretty potentially straightforward and maybe we don't need as much oversight from the commission, is there the potential for us to, is that where we would do the delegation then to the director to make those decisions? Or would we have to
Commissioner,
change the rules?
we could certainly, if we're talking about a delegation order, we could certainly, as this work starts, we could certainly provide you all with a briefing of, and before we, I would suggest doing it before we start the cases. You can do it midway through the process, but I think it's just helpful for everybody to know what is going to happen, right? And so I think you could have us provide a list of, here's what the rationale on, these proposed cancellations. I think what we have been talking about is, we're looking at ones where it's dry land, right? So, and maybe there's instances where that's not the case, but I that's what is the most common thing that, we think about is that, dry land. And so you all might say, oh, okay, well,
Right.
so
Straightforward.
I think that those are the things we can certainly have down the line. So what I think I'm hearing from you all is we will do that check-in on the question around differences between the two options. And based on that, just given what I've heard from you all so far, and certainly if anybody else has anything to add, we'll take that into consideration as we bring back the rules and options on that particular front. Because we know forfeiture is important, right, to everyone.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's one of those where I'm like, we got to raise the hand
big
to make
deal.
sure that you all
Yeah.
do this intentionally, should you decide to. So
Yeah. Commissioner Newman?
One more question. The transfers, final decisions they don't get appealed to the commission, but that's in statute, right? Not in rule, or?
I think it's in rule because it's the statute for new water rights that send it to the commission, right? There's a exceptions provision in the new water right application statute that sends it to the commission. I think most of the processes don't get sent to the commission. And I'm trying to think of where that would be. I think it's because there's not necessarily a process I don't know if I've looked at that on the transfers rules specifically.
Issuing order is the commission finds. So if the commission finds that it can be made without injury, commission shall make an order approving the transfer, but we must
Commission.
have a delegation on that.
Yeah. So there's also delegations, so you might not be able to see it in the statute or the rules, it
Right,
might be
okay.
delegated over, so we'd have to look at that specifically.
Okay, I think we should just be well aware of
Mhm.
what we have delegated, what we want to delegate, and what is going in rule as opposed to either of those two.
Yes,
That's very helpful, though.
commissioners, that is one of the projects that I have on a staff member's project list to look at that at some point we will bring back to you all when we get it complete, because I think that's a fair question at this point.
Okay, we can go ahead and move. Oh, Commissioner Lee, sorry.
Yes, does the commission have any way to appeal a delegated decision if it's a major project concern?
The commissioner, there's the workflows that are in the outlined process. I don't think that there's a situation where the commission would appeal a decision that was made by the department itself, right? So we act in concert, right? Not like the commission wouldn't sue the department, for example. So I guess I'm not sure exactly if I understand the question. And that's why I think the important part is the discussion over what's delegated versus what's not, right?
That would be helpful.
Okay, so next steps. Nice job. You made it through all 13. Okay, so as is clear, we will be sending out information to you because we are 3 plus 3-ish weeks away from the commission meeting where we will discuss these rules and ask for a decision to be made on them. And then we'll, start our phase 2 work. And so this is what you will receive, and we are targeting getting you 9 rule divisions today. I know you'll have all of them read by Monday or Tuesday when we send you the remaining 4.
So we do have 9 of the 13 loaded on the website. So what we're going to do is send you, I just checked, they're all up. We're going to send you a table with the hot links. So you can just click to the links and I'll take you right there.
So you'll see in this table, and in fact, we're going to need to pull back 17 based on the conversation we just had, just to make sure. So you'll get 8, I'm sorry. But what you'll see here is that we have the rule change comment tracker. And so what we've done is we've put in the table, you have the rule number, you have what was the public comment or what was the staff comment. So we've combined them into one table. And that way, every single change that we've made to the rules is in one table and it's explained. And then you have a column that says whether a change was made or not. So you can look and see, oh, obviously, if the staff proposed it, it's one that's been changed, because if it was a staff one and we didn't include it, we just didn't include it, right? So, but we have that column there for the ones that are public comments, so you can see whether or not we made a change as a result of the public comment. I want to be clear that it says change made. It doesn't necessarily mean it was the change that was requested, okay? So, but it does mean that we reviewed that and then we made a change after we reviewed it. And so you'll see that information, our response, and then we have in the a second document, which is the draft proposed rules. Those are in track changes. And those ones are lovely because they're in track changes, and then there's highlights over the track changes. So why is that? Well, one piece to that is that in the documents we have highlighted, the yellow highlighter is the changes that we made from the public comment draft, right? So that's any yellow highlights, that's something that is in that rule tracker, right? And change tracker that we provided you. There's also other coloring schemes that are just the header of each rule division, which tells you this rule division was noticed, is we're going to adopt a new rule, we're going to amend the rule, or we are going to repeal the rule. And so, or no change, right? And so there's a color scheme on there just so you know. The reason we can't, for example, some of our responses to public comment are, we can't consider this proposed change because the rule subsection or the rule section that you are proposing to change was not noticed for changes. And once you start a notice, you cannot go and add a new rule section in there and modify it. So that's why that color coding can help. And then if you're like, this is too much, I just want to read a clean version of the rules without all of this mess on there. The mess I think is helpful, but you can look at the clean version of the rules that are just no track changes and no highlighting, things like that. Yes.
Commissioner Newman.
Thank you. Could you also send us the PowerPoint that your PowerPoint today? Because that sort of highlights and I think it's a good framework for looking at the sections of the rules and looking for what's changed.
Certainly, we can
Thank
do
you.
that. I will say that the PowerPoint, for the most part, it was pretty high level. So like the nuances of changes are often not captured, except for the slide that I will show you here, which is that, well, not this slide. This slide gets to the point that I was making, though. You'll see there's some things in there. When we reviewed the comments, some of the comments were like, yeah, this would be a good thing to address, but we didn't talk about it. The public hasn't had notice, right? Or we just, from the time constraints standpoint, it's just not right for this particular rulemaking. So I want to acknowledge that up front. We can't address every single issue. Some of them have some merit, right? But we can't get to all of them. The other reason we are more sensitive to this is that there's a new court case that came out, I think it was a couple months ago, that was around rulemaking notices. And if you bring in something that no one would know you were doing, right? And then you put it into the final rules and there's nothing in the notice that indicates you're going there, that the courts have found that that's a problem. So we're trying to it's a new court case and we're trying to figure out how cautious we need to be on that, but that is another piece that is an added layer to this. And then there are some pieces that, maybe we could include, but we feel like we should be talking with Iraq about, and there was no conversations with Iraq about it. And so it makes us uncomfortable making those changes on some of the particular ones. So there's some reasons why we might say we still don't think we should address it now. Okay, so with that, just some of the key issues. I think these were the slides that I just noted that might be helpful, where we pointed out what we saw were kind of some of the major questions that came up, or just we knew people were concerned, so we wanted to make sure they were highlighted for you. And because instead of doing it all on these slides, we did it kind of as we were going throughout. I don't know that we need to touch on too much on this slide. So I'm going to look just for the ones that we maybe did not talk about. And the one that we did not talk about is we did receive some concerns around forfeiture and just the provisions around the new law that has the final order becoming automatically final by operation of law. So we tried to tighten up and just make it clear, unless, of course, the department pulls it back, right? Because that language wasn't in there. And so we just want to make sure folks are aware that that is what's contemplated in the statute. The other thing that we did on that was, there was something on defaults that I'm now forgetting what it was. I'll have to come back and let you know if I remember it. But we just tried to point out it's very clear. It's on the rule tracker. It's the very last one. You'll see what we did on that particular issue, trying to allay some of the concerns, but knowing that there's not a ton of flexibility on that particular issue. The other piece I'll flag just on the affidavits. So this would be affidavits coming from external or the list of criteria is the same for the department as it is for these affidavits coming from external parties. And so there's a particular provision that was called out as being of concern, and it's 2G, if you want to take a look at it when you get the paperwork there. But essentially, that was one of the ones where like, we really should be having a conversation about if we're going to change this, with the folks affected. And so that one particular issue is that there are options, even without making a change to it, which is that for external parties, they can still submit other information that's outside of what's listed on the affidavit, right? And then for the department, same thing is true as well. So that was one that you'll see it when you get there. And I think we touched on everything else on this slide. On this one, this is, we touched on a lot of these items today, and I think, I don't know that I'm inclined to get in. So these are the set of rules that I have yet to review. So my ability to comment on anything on these is less so, other than the things we touched on today. So what I will ask is, Lisa, was there any, knowing that we need to wrap up here, we've got about 5 minutes, or no, we've got a little bit of time, but around 5 minutes. So is there anything else on this particular slide that we did not flag that as you've been looking at these items? I think you had talked about, it's that bullet 1 under 380 that, and then maybe the division 77 that we didn't touch on. Is there anything there you want to touch on and flag for folks? I suppose we could walk through both of them.
The item related to same source enlargement. So the definition of enlargement talks about failing to keep the from lands dry after the transfer. So what we get into many times is a portion of the authorized lands that they're proposing to move may be sub-irrigated. And so we had thought we were making the definition more clear in saying that essentially the from lands shall not continue to receive water from the same source under the same right. We added under the same right. A lot of people really liked that. And so we looked at it a little closer and realized that, whoa, that's not what we had intended. The relation between surface water, groundwater, sub-irrigation. So we pulled that back. And I guess where we're coming from is if there's a portion of land, authorized land, that is sub-irrigated, it hasn't been benefiting from the application of water under the water right. And so it could be more of a forfeiture issue, but if we were to allow the transfer to move forward to pick up all those lands and irrigate on new lands somewhere else, that's also an expansion issue, enlargement issue. So we're still kind of wrestling with that and going over the comments.
So other items we'll note on this one is, so we talked a little bit about estimated average natural flow. That one there's a lot of comments on. There's a lot of comments on the we removed it. So the original, way back in when we were doing the RAC, there was a proposal to have notice to the Special Districts Association of Oregon. We removed that. And so there was comments in support of that, and then comments, wishing that it would come back in. There's also a provision, and this one I think is actually really one of the ones that I want to note for you all, which is the Division 77 rules are very specific about how we do reviews for injury and enlargement. Division 380, which is regular transfers, is not. I suspect part of that is because one's newer, right, than the other, possibly. But the awkward part is that we say, yeah, but the review is the same, right? But it doesn't look the same because we have these one rules that are very clear and specific, and then we have these other rules that are very not specific. How's that? So the challenge we have on that one is, I think that, so there's a desire for us to remove the ones that are in Division 77 from some of the commenters, and because the idea is that we should be treating them the same, right? And so I think from our standpoint, we're kind of trying to wrestle with like, well, yeah, but those are the rules that actually say what we do, right? Versus 380, which doesn't say as much what we do. But if we go and we dump all these new rules into 380 without talking to anybody about that, that also seems concerning, right? Even though at the end of the day, we're still trying to do the same thing for both divisions. So that one is one that has come up that I don't know that we've decided what we think is the best approach. Ideally, we would have included it way back when, and had that conversation. But, this is where we're at today. So I see possible thoughts there.
Commissioner Newman?
That just reminded me of a question I've had for quite a while. In the rule amendments, have you added anything about injury to the applications rules? I mean, because it's always felt a little weird to me when the department says, well, we evaluate new applications for injury, we evaluate transfers for injury. The only definition of injury is actually in the transfer rules, but that's the one we use over here too. It seems like it should be in those basic application rules also. But again, if you didn't notice that, it might not be the right time, but I just remembered that.
Commissioner, that's a great question. I remember this coming up, and I believe that there was concerns about adding it to the rules at this point in time without us doing our due diligence, right? Because we were at that point in time where to make sure that there was no differences. I don't think we think there's differences, but I don't know. Katie, do you remember that issue? That would have been back in August that we would have talked about that. So
years ago. The record, Katie Ratcliffe. Thanks, Raquel. Yeah, I do recall there were a number of definitions that we looked at and trying to create consistency across different processes in what we put in Division 300 versus what is maybe not in Division 300 definitions, but appears in different locations. And you're correct, Commissioner Newman, that there isn't a Division 300 definition or a Division 310 definition for injury. So we thought that that was something that it's important enough. It's, one of the two major factors for transfers, and then one of the four-part test for new water right applications. So we wanted to make sure we had sufficient time to really evaluate, does the definition accurately capture what's going on for both programs.
So that would be one of those ones, that's an example of, we think that would be a good thing to do. It's also not included in this rulemaking at this point in time. And that was back when we were doing 18 divisions all at once, so. Okay, anything else on this slide? This is our last slide. And so happy to take any other questions or comments from the commission.
Commissioner Mall?
Overall, this is really helpful. I appreciate as a commissioner being able to assist in this sort of real work and not simply spend a lot of time getting updates and things. So I bravo on sort of pushing the envelope. I know it hasn't been comfortable for all of the participants, given the legislative session and other sorts of things, but I think as a test drive sort of thing, I think it's real work that I feel like as a commissioner that is attractive and helpful. I think I said it last time too, and I made a few questions here, and I don't want to add too much extra work, but I do think that some of these things are so abstract that it would really help to come ahead of time with some, all right, imagine Joe and Julie, and here's the situation, and really walk through, these are the kinds of issues, not just kind of out there, but this happens frequently enough that it needs your attention, not for every rule, but certainly for those that warrant, because there's an easy, it's very easy to get deer in the headlights on some of this stuff and the abstractions. So that's my request. Thanks.
I also like that request. It was helpful to hear an example, because it can get very complicated. And so if it helps us, I'm sure it's helping anyone else that's listening to this process. Any other commissioner comments or questions? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I know that's a lot. I know that you have a lot of work to still do. And so we're going to let you get to that.
Start checking your emails later today and through next week.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All right, now it's time. We'll take a quick break and we'll reconvene at 10:45. Okay, thank you. Welcome back from break. We will move forward with our next agenda item I, meeting minutes. Have the commissioners had a chance to go through the meeting minutes? And do we have a motion?
I move we adopt or approve the December 11th and 12th meeting minutes. And I just want to say I like the linkage features.
Yes. Very helpful linkage features. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I'll go ahead and do the roll call. Commissioner Mall,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman, Commissioner Lee. And I also vote yes. Motion passes. Meeting minutes have been approved. And now we'll move on to agenda item J, commissioner comments. And I think I will start down at the left end of the table and start with Commissioner Lee. Do you have any comments today?
So as you all know, this is the short legislative session. So as the chair of the advocacy committee for the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts, I've spent a lot of time online listening to testimony. And our biggest issue this time, as well as in the long session last year, was cities and counties trying to move UGBs to take in protected property, goal 3 and goal 4, agriculture and forestry. And there's water related to that as well. But there's been a particularly odorous bill brought by the city of Hillsborough to take in 1,700 acres of irrigated land set up in rural reserves with Metro. And there's like over 800 pieces of testimony in opposition, but they still haven't given up on it yet. So the other thing is that on these lands, there would be data related centers, et cetera. So the water issue might be a big one there. That I share everybody's fear about drought, given that we have no snow. I've lived in Sandy 10 years and there has not been a year before with no snow until this one. So hopefully we can do some workouts to make that work. Last of all, I look forward to meeting the 2 new commissioners. And with great heartbreak, I don't like seeing Joe Libas. And I know he's going to do good things someplace else, but still a loss.
I think we all echo that. Commissioner Newman.
I would also like to commemorate Joe's last meeting. You will be very much missed. Very important voice on this commission. But it will be interesting to have some new additions as well. I don't have anything to report other than I've been working diligently on trying to finish my updated second edition of my water law treatise. I have been blissfully uninvolved in the legislative session this time. And I just want to echo Joe's comments of thanking staff. I mean, you guys are all doing such a tremendous job and we really appreciate it.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yes, I would like to say that it's in my tenure in the mountains near where I live, the water is probably going to end up, it's looking right at the moment like the lowest on record. So I'm really hoping for the years where it was similarly low. I believe 81 in 2015 were years where the snowpack was somewhat similar, and at least in 15, I think I remember we had a cooler, wetter spring and summer, and it kind of saved our agricultural production. So I'm optimistic and hoping for that. Yes, Joe, you will be missed. It pains me to admit that, but it is true. Even those times when I'm going, boy, I wish you would just get to the point or not have another question, they always seem to be relevant and good for what we were doing. So thank you. And I had OWEB prepare a little bit of an update of what they would like to be presented here. So, water acquisition grant program rulemaking is underway. They had a rules advisory committee meeting on the February 20th. The public comment period is going to take place during the month of May. The rules are scheduled for review and adoption by OWEB board during the July board meeting. And there's more information about that on the website if anybody's interested. Under administrative rules. And in January, the board adopted updated ecological priorities on the Focus Investment Partnership, or FIP program. The FIP program supports high-performing partnerships in pursuing conservation initiatives that are guided by existing strategy action plans and address board-identified focus investment priorities of significance to the state. One highlight is the aquatic habitat priority was broadened to include several other key aquatic species, including Oregon spotted frog. And there's also more information about that on the website under grant programs and focus investment partnerships. So that's the update on the OWEB front. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Mall?
I've certainly said enough over the years. I just want to reiterate the respect for the work that the staff has done, and in my tenure here I went from watching Bob Baumgartner and Bruce Korn always concerned about budgets related to keeping staffing whole and keeping existing programs whole and not get ahead of ourselves and feeling like, yeah, but there's things that we really ought to do, to coming full circle and understanding 8 years later where they were coming from. And I just think it takes that long to get to know the agency if you're not immersed in it on a daily basis. So I appreciate the patience, and I probably should have warned right away that I've been married for 32 years and my wife was always yelling at me, not yelling at me, but gently reminding me to not be so pokey, literally, literally with my elbows and bony parts and rolling over in bed and that kind of thing. And yet I know that my line of questioning sometimes and my line of assessment of different programs and things probably comes across as pokey, and I apologize for the pain that causes. I hope that it's been taken in good faith, that it's just a sign of care about what we're all doing here. So thank you all just for welcoming me and to be a part of this for as long as I have been. I do hope that Raquel and I were talking last night. I hope that in the coming years, the department the commission could have a meeting in the Eugene Springfield metropolitan area, and we could go to see some of the sites, headwaters, drinking water protection, source protection. You've got 2 new water plants coming in Springfield and Eugene in the coming years. Just a lot of reasons, and I'd be happy to host whatever, to be a part of that. And I'll just say then, there's something happening in Lane County in the May election that's worth paying attention to. It's the first that I'm aware of in Oregon. It's a citizen initiative for something called a Watershed Bill of Rights, and it builds on this idea that rivers, for example, are alive and deserving of the same constitutional rights as a corporation has. Big implications for everything from aerial spraying in forests to, quite frankly, doing restoration work in rivers. So I think more than anything, it will hopefully generate a really productive just discussion about, how do we incorporate what we currently here call in-stream rights, and others just call the flow of the river and that side of things. So pay attention to that. I'm sure there'll be some news stories and opportunities to learn about that. And again, welcome you all to come to the metropolitan area whenever. Thanks, everyone.
Sounds good. Thank you, Commissioner Mall. I also want to just say to staff, thank you. I'm always constantly impressed by the amount of work that goes into your everyday job, and not only And when you come and present to us, you always manage to articulate very well the complexities of the issue, help us understand, and don't make us feel bad for the questions that we ask. So we do appreciate that, and do appreciate all of your hard work. And we're happy to be here to help move things forward. Joe, we are going to miss you. You have been a leader on this commission for a long time. I came onto the commission. I was also impressed by you, and I've learned a lot from you and your questions, and appreciate you. I know when I don't know if it was Bob or Bruce that had left, and Joe, you were so kind, and he did a guitar solo. And you sang a song, and I'm not going to do that today. I don't have a guitar, and I'm not going to do that.
I was online.
But you make me want to. And I wish we had a song for you, but we don't. And just immense gratitude for all the work that you have put into this commission. And we look forward to working with you in the future. And I think meeting in Eugene is a great idea. And that way we can still keep you involved and get to hear some of the things that go on in your backyard. And that's all that I have to say today. Again, thank you to Mindy and Cassidy as well to keep this meeting running smoothly, especially with all the technology. Thank you, Ivan. We will go ahead and wrap up our commissioner comments and go to public comments now. And I think we just have one public comment, and that is from April Snell.
Red. Okay. For the record, April Snell, Executive Director with the Oregon Water Resources Congress. I just wanted to make a few comments on the meeting from the past 2 days. One, thank you all for your continued service on the commission. And I think the discussion that you've had over the past 2 days emphasizes the importance as well as the complexity of the work that comes before you. And I know it's not easy, and I think it's not going to get any easier for any of us. Thinking back to yesterday, when you guys had a presentation on some of the aspects of the integrated water resources strategy and the work plan, just wanted to make a few comments that will be echoing what I've said before in this venue, as far as making sure that there are opportunities for stakeholders outside of the agencies to be a part of the conversation about those work plans. My understanding is the work plan for 2025, 2027 is complete, but there may still be opportunities to get stakeholder input on that. And I would really encourage the commission and the department to work with those of us that are very closely engaged with the department, both in stream and out of stream interests, to not only get our feedback on the work plan and help the department prioritize in a very resource constrained environment, but also as we're looking forward into the 2027 session and biennial budget development. As you guys are aware of, those components for the governor's recommended budget and agency requests will start this spring and summer, and similarly would really encourage that there be stakeholder involvement within that same time frame beyond the standard getting feedback on the legislative and budget concepts, but in relation to this work plan of making sure that not only we're aware, but can be advocates where we can be in supporting those components that will require budget resources that will be very difficult to seek in the next biennium. We can hope that things are going to change, but both traditionally, as you heard yesterday, natural resource agencies get a very small percentage of the overall budget, yet is often disproportionately cut. We don't know how much you're going to see some reductions from the current budget. But again, it's going to be difficult next session, and we want to be helpful to make sure that not only are there programs that are able to continue to move forward, whether it's grants and loans that our irrigation district members use, but also recognizing that it takes people like some of the people that are here in this room to make sure that not only those programs operate, but transactions continue to move forward. And we want to make sure that the progress that we've made over the past several years in reducing backlogs and having greater efficiencies aren't upset or unintentionally impacted by budget cuts. And there will be the agencies are limited in what they can ask for outside of what comes out of the governor's recommended budget. We, however, are not. And it is something where traditionally we have been able to stand up for those key programs, and we would like to do that again, but we can only do it if we have advanced understanding and are able to convey that to our respective members. And I can't speak for the other associations, but many of them are in similar situations as I am, where we have a number of folks we have to report to, as well as our members are facing their own financial constraints as well. And so the more we can have those conversations outside of the legislative environment, hopefully the better off we'll be. And then lastly, on the IWRS, I will again request that the next full IWRS be updated based on a broad stakeholder process similar to how previous IWRS were updated to this last one. So the other comment that I wanted to make, switching gears, is to reiterate the thanks that other commissioners have given Commissioner Mull. I've enjoyed working with you over the years, and while some folks may refer to you as being pokey, well, we can all be pokey at times, and I think it's something that in this sphere that we occupy, the ability to have frank, constructive conversations, be able to have differences of opinion where there are, I think is really important. And part of that the beauty that happens from those conversations and discussions is often initiated by asking the questions to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think while the comments, the discussion you guys had about the rules earlier, I won't directly comment on the rules because the comment period is closed there, but I think that discussion just illustrates the complexity of some of the issues that are coming before the commission and staff. And I think just lastly, that as you look forward and there's new commissioners that come on, hopefully you'll continue the way that you've approached these, which is allowing for thoughtful conversation and stakeholder involvement along the way. But there's a lot of things that need to be updated. There's a lot of rules and statutes that are really old. We can't tackle those all at the same time. You know, the old adage about don't bite off more than you can chew in one sitting, I think is very apt, and ensuring that in future rulemaking efforts, we're focusing on what needs to be done most urgently, but also what can be done within those resources. And I will again offer myself as a resource wherever I can be helpful. Really appreciate your guys' time today and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, April. Appreciate your comments. We do have one more public request from Kimberly Priestley, who joins us online.
Hi, good afternoon, Vice Chair Smitherman, members of the commission. I just want to take a brief moment to also pay thanks to Joe for his many years of service. Everyone at WaterWatch has really appreciated your participation in these discussions, your thoughtfulness, your questions, definitely, and your obvious care for our waters and rivers and users. So I just want to take a second to thank you for your work, and we will miss you. So, but hope to see you around. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Ivan, did you have something else you want to add?
Well, on behalf of the Water Resources Department, I wanted to thank Joe for his 8 years of service. We've got a nice letter from Governor Kotek for you and a card from staff. It's been a real pleasure working with you. You bring a good perspective to the agency, and I look forward to future conversations. So I hope you don't completely walk away from this, but your point on pokiness is good, and both for remaining commissioners and for new commissioners, I want to follow up with what April said. We do need that diverse number of opinions and the hard questions out there. We're not dealing with anything easy. If it gets to the commission, it's generally a challenging topic there. And so I'd encourage all of you and thank Joe for the engaging questions and tough questions over the years. It makes for a better process. I think it makes for better long-term water management decisions across the state. And all Oregonians benefit from that. So thanks again for your time, and look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you. Aw. Well, with that, I think that concludes our commission meeting for the February 26th and 27th. So I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and we'll see everyone again on March 19th. Thank you.